Welcome to the 1,000 Nights and 1 Night. Now, when it was the 388th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the miller's wife told the secret to the neighbor whom she loved, thinking to win his favor, and he agreed with her to come to her by night. So he came, and they dug in the mill and found the treasure and took it forth. Then he asked her, 'How shall we do with this?' And she answered, 'We'll divide it into 2 halves, and we'll share it equally between us. And do thou leave thy wife, and I will cast it about to rid me of my husband. Then shalt thou marry me, and when we are conjoined, we will join the 2 halves of the treasures one to another, and all will be in our hands.' Quoth he, 'I fear lest Satan seduce thee, and thou take some man other than myself, for gold in the house is like the sun in the world. I reek, therefore, it were right that the money all be in my hands, and so give thy whole mind to getting free of thy husband and coming to me.' Quoth she, 'I fear even as thou fearest, nor will I yield up my part to thee, for it was I directed thee to it.' When he heard this, greed of gain prompted him to kill her. So he slew her, and threw her body into the empty hoard hole. But day overtook him and hindered him from covering it up. He therefore took the money and went his way. Now after a while, the miller awoke, and missing his wife, went into the mill, where he fastened the ass to the beam and shouted to it. He went a little, then stopped, whereupon he beat it grievously, but the more he bashed it, the more it drew back, for it was affrighted of the dead woman, and could not go forward. Thereupon the miller, unknowing what hindered the donkey, took out a knife, and goaded it again and again, but still it would not budge. Then he was wroth with it, knowing not the cause of its obstinance, and drove the knife into its flanks, and it fell down, dead. But when the sun rose, he saw his donkey lying dead, and likewise his wife in the place of the treasure, and great was his rage, and sore was his loss of his hoard, and the death of his wife, and his ass. All this came of his letting his wife into his secret, and not keeping it to himself. And I have heard the tale of the simpleton and the sharper. A certain simpleton was once walking along, hailing his ass after him by the halter, with a pair of sharpers saw him, and one said to this fellow, 'I will take that ass from yonder wight.' Asked the other, 'How wilt thou do that?' 'Follow me, and I will show thee,' answered the first. So the coney catcher went up to the ass, and loosing it from the halter, gave the beast to this fellow. Then he haltered his own head, and followed Tom Fool till he knew the other had gotten clean off with the ass, when he stood still. The oaf halt at the halter, but the rascal stirred not. So he turned, and seeing the halter on a man's neck, said to him, 'What art thou?' Quoth the sharper, 'I am thine ass, and my story is a marvellous one, 'tis this. Know that I have a pious old mother, and came into her one day drunk, and she said to me, O my son, repent to the Almighty of these thy transgressions. But I took my staff and beat her, whereupon she cursed me, and Allah changed me into an ass, and caused me fall into thy hands, where I have remained till this moment. However, today my mother called me to mind, and her heart yearned towards me, so she prayed for me, and the Lord restored me to my former shape amongst the sons of Adam.' Cried the silly one, 'There is no majesty, and there is no might, save in Allah, the glorious, the great.' 'Allah upon thee, O my brother, acquit me of what I have done with thee in the way of riding, and so forth.' Then he let the coney catcher go, and returned home drunken with chagrin, and concern as with wine. His wife asked him, 'What aileth thee, and where is thy donkey?' And he answered, 'Thou knowest not what this ass, but I will tell thee.' So he told her the story, and she exclaimed, 'Alack and alas, for the punishment we shall receive from Almighty Allah! How could we have used a man as a beast of burden all this while?' And she gave alms by way of atonement, and prayed pardon of heaven. Then the man abode while at home, idle and feckless, till she said to him, 'How long wilt thou sit at home doing naught? Go to the market, and buy us an ass, and ply thy work with it.' Accordingly, he went to the market, and stopped by the ass stand, where, behold, he saw his own ass for sale. So he went up to it, and clapping his mouth to his ears, said to it, Woe to thee, thou ne'er-do-well! Doubtless thou hast been getting drunk again, and beating thy mother, but by Allah, I will never buy thee more. And he left it, and went away. And they tell a tale concerning the Qazi Abu Yusuf with Harun al-Rashid and Queen Zubaydah. The Caliph Harun al-Rashid went up one noontide to his couch to lie down, and mounting found upon the bedclothes semen freshly admitted, whereat he was startled and troubled with sore trouble. So he called the lady Zubaydah and said to her, What is that spilt on the bed? She looked at it and replied, O Commander of the Faithful, it is semen. Quoth he, Tell me truly what this meaneth, or I will lay violent hands on thee forthright. Quoth she, By Allah, O Commander of the Faithful, indeed I not know how it came there, and I am guiltless of wherefore thou suspectest me. So send for Qazi Abu Yusuf, and acquaint him with the case. The judge raised his eyes to the ceiling, and seeing a crack there, and said to the Caliph, O Commander of the Faithful, in very sooth, the bat hath seed like that of a man, and that is bat semen. Then he called for a spear, and thrust it into the crevice, whereupon down fell the bat. In this manner the Caliph's suspicions were dispelled. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Now, when it was the 389th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Qazi Abu Yusuf took the spear and thrust it into the crevice, down fell the bat. And thus the Caliph's suspicions were dispelled, and the innocence of Zubaydah was made manifest, whereat she gave loud and liberal vent to her joy, and pronounced Abu Yusuf a magnificent reward. Now there were with her certain delicious fruits out of their season, and she knew of others in the garden. So she asked Abu Yusuf, O Imnan of the faith, which wouldest thou rather have of the two kinds of fruit, those that are here, or those that are not here? And he answered, Our code forbiddeth us to pronounce judgment on the absent. When as they are present, we will give our decision. So she let bring the two kinds of fruit before him, and he ate of both. Quoth she, What is the difference between them? And quoth he, As often as I think to praise one kind, the adversary putteth in its claim. The Caliph laughed at his answer, and made him a rich present, and Zubaydah also gave him what she had promised him, and he went away rejoicing, seeing then the virtues of the Iman, and how his hands were manifest the truth and the innocence of the lady Zubaydah. And amongst other stories is that of the Caliph al-Hakim and the merchant. The Caliph al-Hakim bin al-Rima, riding out in a state procession one day when he passed along a garden wherein he saw a man surrounded by negro slaves and eunuchs. He asked himself for a draught of water, and the man gave him to drink, saying, Belike the Commander of the Faithful will honor me by alighting in this my garden. So the Caliph dismounted, and with his suite excuse me, sat down and brought out to him 100 rugs, and 100 leather mats, and 100 cushions, and set before them 100 dishes of fruits, 100 bowls of sweetmeats, and 100 jars of sugared sherbets, at which the Caliph marveled with such amazement, and said to his host, O man, verily this thy case is wondrous. Dost thou know of our coming, and make this preparation for us? He replied, No, by Allah, O Commander of the Faithful, I knew not of thy coming, and I am a merchant of the rest of thy subjects, but I have 100 concubines. So when the Commander of the Faithful honored me by alighting with me, I sent to each of them, bidding her send me her morning meal in the garden. So they sent me each of her furniture and the surplus of her meat and drink, and every day each sendeth me a dish of meat, and another of cooling marinades, also a platter of fruits, and a bowl of sweetmeats, and a jar of sherbet. This is my noonday dinner, nor have I added aught thereto for thee. Then the Commander of the Faithful, al-Hakim bi Amrallah, prostrated himself in thanksgiving to the Almighty, extolled and exalted be his name, and said, Praise be Allah, who hath been so bountiful to one of our lieges. And he entertained the Caliph and his hosts without making ready for them. Nay, he fed them with a surplusage of his day's provisions. Then he sent for all the dirhams in the treasury that had been struck that year, and they were in number 3,700,000. Nor did he mount till the money came, when he gave it to the merchant, saying, Use this as thy state may require, and thy generosity deserveth more than this. Then he took horse and rode away. And I have heard a story concerning King Kisra and Uswaran and the village damsel. The just King Kursa on Sarwaran one day rode forth to the chase, and in pursuit of a deer became separated from his suite. Presently he caught sight of a hamlet near hand, and being sore athirst, he made for it, and presenting himself at the door of a house that lay by the wayside, asked for a draught of water. So a damsel came out and looked at him, then going back into the house, pressed the juice from a single sugar cane into a bowl, and mixed it with water. After which she strewed on the top some scented stuff, as it were dust, and carried it to the king. Thereupon he, seeing in it what resembled dust, drank it little by little, till it came to the end. When said he to her, O damsel, the drink is good, and how sweet it had been, but for the dust in it that troubled it. Answered she, O guest, I put in that powder for a purpose. And he asked, And why didst thou do that? So replied she, I saw thee exceedingly thirsty, and feared that thou wouldst drain the whole at one draught, that this would be thy mischief. And but for this dust that troubled the drink, so hast thou done. The just king wondered at her words, knowing that they came of her wit and good sense, and said to her, From how many sugar canes didst thou express this draught? One, answered she. What, and Sarwarn, marveled, and calling for the register of the village taxes, saw that its assessment was but little, and bethought him to increase it on his return to his palace, saying in himself, A village where they get this much juice out of one sugar cane, why is it so lightly taxed? He then left the village and pursued his chase, and as he came back to the end of the day, he passed alone by the same door, and called again for drink. Whereupon the same damsel came out, and knowing him at look, went in and fetched him water. It was some time before she returned, and Ansarwan wondered thereat, and said to her, Why hast thou tarried? And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Now, when it was the 390th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king. Then when Ansarwan hurried the damsel, and asked her, Why hast thou tarried? She answered, Because a single sugar cane gave not enough for thy need, so I pressed 3, but they yielded not so much as did one before. Rejoined he, What is the cause of that? And she replied, The cause of it is that when the Sultan's mind is changed against a folk, their prosperity ceaseth, and their good waxeth less. So Ansar laughed, and dismissed from his mind that which he had proposed against the villagers. Moreover, he took the damsel to wife, and there being pleased with her much wit and acuteness, and the excellence of her speech. And they tell another tale of the water carrier and the goldsmith's wife. There was once in the city of Bokhara a water carrier who used to carry water to the house of a goldsmith, and had done this for 30 years. Now the goldsmith had a wife of exceeding beauty and loveliness, brilliancy and perfect grace, and she withal renowned for piety, chastity, and modesty. One day the water carrier came as of custom, and poured the water into the cisterns. Now the woman was standing in the midst of the court. So he went close up to her, and taking her hand, stroked it, and pressed it, and then went away and left her. When her husband came home from the bazaar, she said to him, I would have thee tell me what thing thou hast done in the market this day, to anger Almighty Allah. Quoth he, I have done nothing to offend the Lord. Nay, rejoined she, but by Allah thou hast indeed done something to anger him, and unless thou tell me the whole truth, I will not abide in thy house, and thou shalt not see me, nor will I see thee. So he confessed, I will tell you the truth of what I did this day. It so chanced that as I was sitting in my shop, As of wont, a woman came up to me and bade me make her a bracelet of gold. Then she went away, and I brought her a bracelet and laid it aside. But when she returned and I brought her out the bracelet, she put forth her hand, and I clasped the bracelet on her wrist. And I wondered at the whiteness of her hand and the beauty of her wrist, which would captivate any beholder. And I recalled what the poet saith: her forearms tight with their bangles show, like fire ablaze on the waves of flow. As by furious gold were the water girt, and belted around by a living low. So I took her hand, and pressed it, and squeezed it. Said the woman, Great God, why didst thou this ill thing? Know that the water carrier who hath come to our house these 30 years, nor sawest thou ever any treason in him, took my hand this day, and pressed and squeezed it. Said her husband, O woman, let us crave pardon of Allah. Verily I repent of what I did, and do thou ask forgiveness of the Lord for me. She cried, Allah pardon me and thee, and receive us unto this holy keeping. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Now, when it was the 391st night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the goldsmith's wife cried out, Allah pardon me and thee, and receive us from this holy keeping. And on the next day the water carrier came into the jeweller's wife, and throwing himself at her feet, grovelled in the dust, and besought pardon of her, saying, O my lady, acquit me of that which Satan deluded me to do, for it was he that seduced me and led me astray. She answered, Go thy ways. The sin was not in thee, but in my husband, for that he did what he did in his shop, and Allah hath retaliated upon him in this world. And it is related that the goldsmith, when his wife told him how the water carrier had used her, said, Tit for tat, and blow for blow. Had I done more, the water carrier had done more, which became a current byword among the folk. Therefore it behoveth the wife to be both outward and inward with her husband, contenting herself with little from him, if he cannot give her much, and taking pattern by Aisha the truthful and Fatima the virgin mother, Allah Almighty accept them of twain, that she may be of the company of the righteous ancestry. And I have heard the following tale of Kushra and Shiran and the fisherman. King Kushra Shinshaw of Persia loved fish, and one day, as he sat his saloon, he and Shirin his wife, there came a fisherman with a great fish, and he laid it before the king, who was pleased, and ordered the man 4,000 dirhams. Thereupon Shirin said to the king, Thou hast done ill. Asked he, And why? And she answered, Because, if after this thou give one of thy courtiers a like sum, he will disdain it, and say, He hath but given me the like of what he gave the fisherman. And if thou give him less, the same will say, He despiseth me, and giveth me less than he gave the fisherman. Regained Kushra, Thou art right, but it would dishonor a king to go back on his gift, and the thing is done. Quoth Shirin, If thou wilt, I will contrive thee a means to get it back from him. Quoth he, How so? And she said, Call back, if thou so please, the fisherman, and ask him if the fish be male or female. If he say male, say thou, We want a female. And if he say female, say, We want a male. So the king sent for the fisherman, who was a man of wit and acuteness, and said to him, Is this fish male or female? Whereupon the fisherman kissed the ground and answered, This fish is hermaphrodite, neither male nor female. Kushra laughed at his clever reply, and ordered him another 4,000 dirhams. So the fish went to the treasury, and took his 8,000 dirhams, and put them in a sack he had with him. Then throwing it over his shoulder, he was going away when he dropped a dirham. So he laid the bag off his back, and stooped down to pick it up. Now the king and Shirin were looking on, and the queen said, O king, didst thou note the meanness of the man, in that he must needs stoop down to pick up the 1 dirham, and could not bring himself to leave it for one of the king's servants? When the king heard these words, he was exceeding wroth with the fisherman, and said, Thou art right, O Shirin. So he called the man back, and he said, Thou low-minded carle, thou art so man, how couldst thou not put the bag with all the money of thy back, and bend thee groundwards to pick up the 1 dirham, and grudged to leave it where it fell? Thereupon the fisherman kissed the earth before him and answered, May Allah prolong the king's life. Indeed, I did not pick up the dirham off the ground because of its value in my eyes, but I raised it off the earth because of one of its faces is the likeness of the king, and on the other his name. And I feared lest anyone should unwittingly set foot upon it, thus dishonoring the name and presentment of the king, and I be blamed for this offense. The king wondered at his words, and approved of his wit and shrewdness, and ordered him yet another 4,000 dirhams. Moreover, he bade cry abroad his kingdom, saying, It behoveth none to be guided by woman's counsel, for whoso followeth their advice loseth one of his dirhams other twain. And here is the tale of Yahya bin Khalid, the Barmecide, and the poor man. Yahya bin Khalid, the Barmecide, was returning home one day from the caliph's palace, when he saw at the gate of his mansion a man who rose as he drew near and saluted him, saying, O Yahya, I am in sore need of that which is in thy hand, and I make Allah my intermediary with thee. So Yahya caused a place to be set apart for him in his house, and bade his treasurer carry him 1,000 dirhams every day, and ordered that his diet be of the choicest of his own meat. The man abode in this case a whole month, at the end of which time, having received in all 30,000 dirhams, and fearing lest Yahya should take the money from him because of the greatness of the sum, he departed by stealth. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. And so do I cease my telling for the day, till it be morrow.